All right, kicking us off a little bit late. Apologies for that. And I'm going to now move people around on the screen, including myself. Okay, there we go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to this month's edition of Merge PHP, a collaboration of various user groups across the US talking about PHP and PHP related things, both online and in person. So let me hop over to the next slide here. I have a bunch of user groups represented, including Atlanta PHP, which is being hidden by our user bubbles there. Now, move us around a little bit because we have this JetBrains license raffle. And if you don't already have PHP Storm, whether you are building software by hand or whether you're making a computer do it, PHP Storm has a lot of tooling built in. I still use it extremely regularly to both understand and modify the code that I work on. This JetBrains license raffle also works for JetBrains IDEs other than PHP Storm. So wherever your IDE tool journey may take you, JetBrains has one for you. And first one to email gets it. And of course, this is not. There we go. So, PHP supported versions. We have 8.5 as the latest one, and 8.4 is still under active support. 8.3 and 8.2 have security fixes only. So if you're on one of those, you should upgrade to 8.4 or 8.5. It's really not a big deal, not much in the way of BC breaks. And if you're worried about deprecation warnings, then turn them on in your load environments, turn them off in production, and move on. If you have an older version and it's maintained by your Linux distribution, then fair enough. But really, there's no reason not to get on the latest version of PHP. I just recently did various upgrades of things to 8.5, and it was very much smooth sailing. So there are a fair number of upcoming conferences and events. Since we were here last, PHP Tech happened in Chicago. The other US-based conference this year is Longhorn PHP in October here in Austin. International PHP Conference is happening right now. Symphony Online is happening also right now. Got a bunch of WordPress events and such. Laracon is in Boston this year. I'm sure tickets have already sold out. If you're looking for a PHP conference on this side of the pond, Longhorn PHP is the one to go to. CFP is open until the end of the month. If you want to speak, we are doing a 2-day conference this time. First day is tutorial, second day is conference. You can mix and match which one you want to go to. We'd love to have folks submitting their talks. We are on various socials. I actually remembered today to post on Mastodon, the site formerly known as Twitter, prior to this presentation to let folks know that we would be going live this evening. You can follow us there as well as on YouTube. We also have recordings of this up on phpc.tv after the live stream concludes. So for next month, Joe Ferguson will be talking about Ansible. You can find more information about that on mergephp.com. If you have a talk idea, we do have talks lined up for July and August, but once you hit September, I believe we've got that open and maybe a presentation or two after that between September and the end of the year. So if you got a talk idea, whether that's a full-length talk or if you want to get in a little bit sooner, a lightning talk that's 5 or 10 minutes, we'd love to hear it. Contact us on socials. And now we are getting into tonight's talk with Mark Niebergall. This is a reprise of a presentation he did recently at PHP Tech in Chicago about AI-assisted development, about throwing LLMs at various dev things and actually getting a decent result back out. So with that, I will turn it over to, I will drop myself out of the UI here. And Mark, you have the floor. Go ahead and share your screen and I'll unshare this one.
All right, thank you, Ian. It's taking a second here to let me share. Apparently I have to quit and be right back. I'll be right back. Permissions.
Yep.
All right, sorry about that. Hey, ready, Ian, when you're ready. Flip it over. Okay. Share the screen, come on. Window. Sorry about that. There we go. That should be up and showing.
We're seeing we're seeing the slide view, or not the slide view, the PowerPoint or whatever, or Keynote rather than the actual presentation. But if you're about to hit the present button, then we're good.
I had hit the present button already, so let's see if I can fix that real quick. Sorry.
No problem.
Let's just do entire screen. It's going to do that. Sweet. Okay. Hopefully that looks much better.
Got it.
Okay. We're talking tonight about, or afternoon, evening, wherever you're at, about AI-assisted development. I gave gave this talk, as Ian mentioned, at PHP Tech. I've, of course, done more AI-assisted development since then, so there have some little more takeaways and keys there. I am Mark Niebergall, and we'll dive into it. First is a video. It's a little weird or skinny, but this is me finishing up the Lodija bike race. That was the wrong button, sorry. It was a 202-mile bike race that starts in northern Utah, in Logan, and ends in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It was just under 10 hours for me, with a full day of riding. It was an amazing experience, and I rode that on. I pulled up, I realized I probably had the oldest bike in the group, but it got me through to the end. And so in order to do a bike race like that, a bike ride like that, I did a lot of training. I live in the mountains, or live near the mountains in Utah. And so over here on the left is me riding the Alpine Loop, which is a world-class cycling loop, well known. It's a big high mountain pass. You climb up past Sundance Ski Resort and go to the top of the Alpine Loop summit, and then down American Fork Canyon. It's got a lot of vertical climbing, but along the way, I hit problems too. So on the right there is me on my newer bike that has, it might be hard to see, but there's a little metal shard in my bike tire, and my tire is flat. And so I'm having to replace that. I've learned that you need to come prepared, because while the bike usually works, it doesn't always work, and there's often problems. But if you know how to get around them, if you can prepare, that you can keep going. And in this case, I just replaced a flat tire with the tools and equipment that I had, and carried on. That was not on the bike race, luckily. That was just a training ride where I got the flat tire. But similarly with AI, I find that AI is kind of like the bike, where we have different tools that help us. Sometimes it doesn't work the way we want it to. Sometimes it has major problems, but it can get us there. And using it the best way will help accelerate our development and get things done that we want to and need to. I find it helpful if I give my context of like what I am and what I do for development. I am a staff software engineer,
And that turns audio off.
and I am using AI-assisted development daily. I use it all the time in all the code that I'm writing.
Seems 4.5.
Probably hear some background noise. Ian is something. Oh. So anyways, I'm using AI every day, heavily, to write the code that I need.
This is a
And I am using
test,
PHP
if nothing else.
with PHP Storm most of the time, and
Cool.
I use AI agents for most of the work I do, most of the development I do.
Audio.
And I have a heavy focus on architecture and on back-end development. AI did help write most of this talk. I did coach it, and I fall into the same patterns I use in development. But this is not an AI or a hype talk. I'm not of the perspective that AI is replacing engineers. I see it as more of a tool. Generally, it's not autonomous, especially with most of the development specifically, and we're interacting with it. We're coaching it along. We're giving it prompts and contexts, and babysitting it a bit. That's where the current state of AI is at. it still makes lots of has lots of issues and mistakes. It doesn't do things quite right. You tell it to do something, it'll do something different, and so on. But overall, it's helpful. And my experience has been that engineering development, or engineering judgment, and
I'll figure it out.
decision making makes the biggest difference. We're going to go into real world AI workflows, some agents that are available, ways to prompt to get the best results back, refactoring with AI, debugging, how to use AI to help with figuring out causes of bugs, productivity gains that happen, and failure modes. Essentially, the main point here is that AI is good as a collaborative tool. We can use it to help development, and this is how we essentially do this as developers, specifically around PHP. So software development has changed. For me, historically, I've been around long enough. You had a problem, you go search the docs, look into things, try to figure things out. You go look online, try to find out solutions and ideas, and see how other people have solved this problem. That was a very common approach that I took. Nowadays, the methodology is you describe the intent, what you want to have done, and you're guiding the agent and prompting the agent as it goes along. No more having to go look up Stack Overflow, or I often haven't even had to go to PHP docs, but instead going to the agent and telling the agent, describing the problem. Kind of the classic workflow that I usually see is you get a ticket, analyze that, you do some analysis, looking at the code, reviewing the business context, understanding the ticket, and then there's tests and code written. So you kind of get understanding what needs to happen, identifying where the problem is or where the changes need to happen, and then making those changes. So we're doing this kind of agile approach. Nowadays, what I find I am doing most of the time is I get a ticket. I usually have an idea what the ticket is, but I will go and prompt AI first. I'll say, hey, I need to work on this ticket. Here's the ticket -1234, and it's fixing this thing or adding this feature. And while AI is off reading the ticket and understanding it, doing these integrations and analysis, I am starting to look at more depth about the ticket and watching the code, or looking at the code and seeing if there's any prompts I can help out with. While I am doing that and AI is off doing its thing, it starts generating code. I'm usually watching the diff viewer in PHP Storm, keeping an eye on files modified or files added, and seeing what's going on. And I'm actively reviewing the changes being made and re-steering, re-guiding the AI agent as needed as it goes along. Which is essentially vibe coding, right? So this is the hot term in software engineering, software development, is vibe coding. It's essentially a conversational development. You're interacting constantly with the AI agent, and it is going and making the code changes for you. The true sense of vibe coding is you're not changing the code. I'm okay changing lines of code. I have plenty of experience doing that. I'll go make small edits, but a lot of the code, the bulk of it, is written by AI. It's a very rapid iteration. Instead of having to figure out changes and work through it and debug constantly, the changes are largely made in bulk and done rapidly. And like I said, we're steering the direction of it. We're guiding the ship rather than making the code changes ourselves. It's very fast, much faster than I could write the code. Unless it's like a one-word change or verbiage change and I already know where it's at in the code, most of the time AI is going to be able to make these changes faster than I can. And that's generally true about any of the changes we're making. It's very fast, and it's very pattern aware because it's code. It's code understanding our code. I would make the argument that AI is not something we can trust. We can't trust the changes, that they're going to be safe and secure and so on. It's not always going to make accurate analysis of what's going on. And so it's important that we take ownership of our code. Even though it was written by an AI agent, we still have ownership of that and are responsible for the changes being made. And so it's up to us as developers to be doing a check on what's actually being changed. Generally, right now, I'm using PHP Storm. I'm using a PHP Storm plugin called Augment. Within that, I'm using the Cloud Opus 4.7 model, and I'm actively using PHP Stan and PHP Unit. I am a big believer in tests, and so my code will have lots of tests on it, integration and unit tests. And so I'm having AI help me write a majority of those tests. And then PHP Stan, of course, running on the CI engine, is actively running on all my pull requests. And these all together complement very nicely. Having a smart IDE, having a good agent tool, having testability, and having Stan or standards, that's static code analysis like that. To me, having the AI being able to, or the IDE being integrated with the AI agents is super helpful. I can have it all in one place. The agent is project aware. It's got context. It's got understanding of the code base. It can make the changes it needs to all in one place, and I can watch it closely. And it's got the information about the typing and the information, the business context. So kind of the progression of AI and helping out with our code. It started with autocomplete. So first you had it so you're typing a variable and it would, you could tab out and it would complete the variable name for you. So you didn't have to enter the whole variable name, or it would start to autocomplete, maybe the rest of a line, or a log line that you're trying to manually type. The IDEs became a little bit smarter, and so we started getting autocomplete. Automatically adding curly braces and those simple little things. So that's what I consider to be autocomplete. Chats are it's using it's not making code changes. The agent, I shouldn't say agent, the LLMs are being used to chat and respond and give information, give an analysis or details, but it's not going and making code changes. That's the big difference there. So chat is a discussion only. It's not file changes happening. It's going to explain things and suggest things and analyze things, give you some information. It might be able to find out where a bug is located. It might be able to do those kind of things. Typically, a chat is really good for a spike. If you're working on a spike and you do research and things, it's a great example when to use a chat. And of course, an agent is doing the file modification. It'll be doing the chat plus those modifications for you and executing things. I have my agents running PHP Unit and PHP Stan, and I have them running code regularly so that it's actually running the code and checking it. So an agent is active. It's has the ability to execute commands, and including updating file content. Some other IDE plugins that are available. There's Juni, which is the JetBrains AI. There's GitHub Copilot, which is really popular, of course. Continue.dev, Codium, and Windsurf. There's others too, but they're all plugins that are going to be using an LLM model to be able to go out and do some AI things for you. Of course, there's a cost typically for these, unless you're using a local LLM. There's going to be cost associated with these. Example like Augment, you could go and choose different models that you're using. So if you want to use Sonnet or Haiku or whatever, Opus or whatever Claude, you can choose in there which one it's using. You can choose the most appropriate one, and of course your tokens there's a cost associated with the tokens. The better the model, usually the more expensive it is. So Augment is good for agent workflows and executing and running things. Junie is really good at JetBrains integration because it's written by JetBrains. So it's got really good integration there. Copilot's got really good autocomplete. There's some examples there. So coming back to the bike example, we are still in charge. We're still the one that's running the bike or using the AI. I see AI as an accelerator. So when I'm out on my bike rides, very commonly I'll see or pass by people on e-bikes. I see AI as if it's an e-bike, right? So it's giving someone the ability to be out there. In the biking example, they're out there on the trail cycling and going faster than they would otherwise be able to go because they have that electronic motor assistance running for them. AI is similar to that, in my opinion. It's an accelerator. We would be able to still complete and make the code changes that it's making. It would just take us a lot longer. So it's speeding up that process for us. We, of course, would make probably different changes, but they'd be similar, comparable. It's important that when you're sitting on a bike, I keep my hands on the handlebars. I am steering constantly, and I am running the brakes and shifting gears. And similarly, with AI, we are the ones putting on the brakes if it's going the wrong direction. We're the ones that are changing the direction and steering the bike along as we go along. So for example, let's say we get a request ticket coming in. That's to go add supports for rate limiting. It's important that the ticket has good details and information about it. So generally when I'm pre-grooming and grooming and going through a ticket, I'm making sure it has good information on it. That good information on it will give the AI agent the best chance of implementing correct changes. I'll often be putting in dev notes on a ticket and saying, hey, the table structure is going to look like this, and it's going to be needing to go in this specific area of the code, and this is the code architecture, and this is what some of the more technical requirements. And I find that helps AI make smarter decisions when it's implementing the changes. So it's important that our tickets are well written, and that will help with AI implementation. So the initial prompt, so I will, I go in there, I'll say, hey, implement this ticket. It's rate limiting, API rate limiting. And I want you to follow existing coding architecture patterns. And so the prompt will go out and the agent will start doing its work. It'll start doing its integrations that it needs to, integrating with the ticketing system. So for example, if you're using GitLab or Bitbucket or Jira or whatever ticketing system you're using, they're usually able to set up an integration with that ticketing system. So it's going to be able to go out and read the context from the ticket and go start implementing that change for you. It also have context about your project. We'll get into that a little bit later about setting up context for a project. So the typical flow here, what's going on. A developer is giving the agent a prompt. That prompt is going through the IDE plugin, and that plugin is going to reach out to the LLM via an API, MCP server, and then that's going to have context and tools associated with it. It's going to start generating changes to the code, and the developer is going to be reviewing those. It's kind of a general flow of how this information is going and how that looks. Behind the scenes, so the context files get loaded within a project. Typically, you have a directory for AI context, which are markdown files, which give information about the project. So you might have a docs/AI/phpunit.md, which would be a markdown file, and it would tell the AI agent how to run PHP unit on whatever environment you're running on. So if you're using a virtual machine or Docker containers, or you have it running locally on your machine, or whatever that might be, you will include the command it needs to run, and so it's going to be able to know how to go run those PHP unit tests. You're going to give it information about your code architecture. So you'll say, I'm using Symfony or Laravel or Laminus or whatever other framework you're using. You can describe hey, I'm using domain-driven design, I'm using MVC, or I'm using middleware, and so on, and giving requirements. So hey, I want you to use test-driven development, or I want you to have a specific coverage. It's giving enough context information about the code so it knows what to do. If you have any naming standards, you have, we're using camel case, we're using, the tests are named this way, we're using BDD, behavioral driven development doc blocks on our tests. We're saying, hey, we're using PHP Stan level 8 or whatever level we might be at. And so that really helps AI understand and know what's going on before it even starts running the code or making the code changes. It's going to go retrieve the relevant files that are needed. The prompt gets expanded and parsed and figured out what's being asked. And then the model is going to go and generate those changes for us. I mentioned earlier that I'm constantly watching the diff viewer in my IDE. I'm really watching for, is the agent executing and making the changes as I would expect? So I'm thinking through, if I was implementing this by myself manually, how would I do that and what would it look like? I expect it to be making changes in these specific files. A common one, no matter how many times I prompt it, it tends to forget eventually that we don't make SQL queries inside of a service class. And so I'm like, hey, go back to the repository, be an example there of guiding that architecture, keeping code clean, following these, KISS and other good coding, solid coding practices. If I see it doing copy pasta, I'll say, hey, don't copy paste that. It needs to be, reuse this class over here. Don't reinvent this wheel. It's already existing over in this service or class over here. And I'll point it out and guide it to use the correct classes that it needs to be using. Making sure that there's no tight coupling, right? So we want our code to be testable. And if it's instantiating classes inside of functions, it's probably not going to be very testable. So I'm making sure it's doing dependency injection. Making sure it's naming things correctly. Is it following naming standards that we have? Is it putting classes in the correct places, and so on? And of course, making sure that the tests are written and that the tests are actually good. Historically, the tests I've seen written some of them are really bad. And so it's important to keep an eye, especially on the tests, that it's writing high value tests rather than writing tests just to write tests. Look at the test, and sometimes it's just asserting that something is returning an int. Well, it's typed as an int. Of course, it's going to return an int. Or it's just testing things that are not needing to be tested. And so it's important to keep an eye on that. Redirecting the agent. So some of the things I watching for, and I'll stop the agent and prompt it again if it's going off the rails. For example, if it's starting to make a fat controller by putting too much business logic in there, or if it's not using middleware layers correctly, be another example. If it's, I'm going to say, hey, move that logic over into a proper domain, it's in the wrong domain. So redirecting it architecturally, because I don't want to go burn a bunch of tokens on code that's just going to have to be refactored completely after its first pass. So that's kind of my gauge of when I stop the AI from doing what it's doing and rework and have it, redirect it. If it's just like, hey, there's too many comments in here, or I don't like the formatting, this cosmetic thing, I'll usually wait till it's done, and then I'll go say, hey, go clean this one little thing up, and it's usually pretty fast at that. But for more things, if it's going to have to get refactored, I'm usually willing to just stop it and have I redirect it from there. I do find that my AI agents usually work best when I'm using iteratively. So having a giant prompt with multiple paragraphs usually doesn't go very well. It usually gets the agent often gets confused on what it's supposed to be going down. It loses focus or emphasis. I find it to be much more effective if I'm iterating over things. Similar to how we don't want to pick up a user story that's a 13-pointer. Historically, we know those are going to be very difficult and overly complex. If we're breaking down our prompts into smaller, more manageable prompts, generally we're going to get better code output from there. If you're working on code manually, you're probably going to be doing this anyways. To follow this pattern, you're going to start simple and you're going to add iteratively to it as you're writing tests. Same thing with AI agents and prompts. Start small and just feed it bit by bit, rather than having to try to finish everything all at once. So what are tokens? We've mentioned tokens. Won't go super deep into it, but a tokens is text that's processed by the model. So if every prompt you make is going to be burning or using a token, and tokens add up quickly. So the more context you have and the bigger, smarter, more complex models are going to have a higher cost per token. So you typically the user or an organization's a lot of tokens over a time period. So you maybe say this many tokens every month, or this user can have so many tokens over this period, and then you're charged that way. You're paying for that. Why it matters? If you have large context windows, there are some benefits to that. You can have increased accuracy. So if your context, like in your AI docs, if you have well-written documentation that's going to get things right the first time, you're not going to have to refactor or rework, babysit the agent as much. So that accuracy is really helpful. It saves time on using the agent. There is an increased cost, of course, as you're having more context and more prompts. And there's latency, there's that overhead that is incurred. On the AI memory and context, if you get into the interactions, the API calls going on, you'll see a conversation history. So as it's going back and forth, you start seeing a history being passed around, and it's giving a repository context. Agent's going to have, they're aware of the coding standards and tool access, as I mentioned, can run different things like PHP unit, PHP stan, anything else that you explain or tell it how you can do different things. There's a lot of, sky's the limit, right? You can configure it to do whatever you need it to do. give it that ability to access things and run commands. So whatever command you can run, you can set that up. What is MCP? So this is not an MCP talk, but it's important to understand the concept. It's model context protocol, and it's just the way the AI tools are connecting to external systems. Within a project, you can set up an MCP server, or I see them as kind of like API calls. It's an API endpoint that's specifically used for AI agents and chats and interactions. So MCP examples, AI agents, they can have MCP examples. They can connect to a ticketing system. They can interact with source control. So if you're having, whether it's GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab, whatever source control system you're using, you're going to have MCP interaction there. Databases, so they can connect to your local database and be able to read the data and interact there. If you have a documentation platform or system, you can have interacting with that. So it can interact with your documentation repository, have a better understanding of business processes. So how those change workflows, instead of copying, pasting things, agents can go and pull the live data, right? They're querying the systems, they're executing the actions. They have the ability to get the information that they need and pull the live changes there. Ticketing integration, I've mentioned this already, but just make sure that's very clear. You can set it up, your agents to be able to, within your plugin and your IDE, you can configure it to be able to interact with your ticketing system, which gives you the ability to understand, acceptance criteria and link the commits and find out information about that. So it's really powerful to have that integration set up. To me, it's a key configuration to be included. Common strengths. I find that AI is very helpful with just boilerplate code. So code that's monotonous, tedious. For example, the classic one is, hey, I need to go set up an entity that's for a database table, and it's got a whole bunch of columns on it. I'm not going to go and manually type those out. I'm just going to tell AI, hey, I need an entity for this database table, and it will go and generate that entity for me. I can go and create the repository for it and so on, and the test for that. I'm no longer having to go and do that or have some sort of custom code generation or anything else like that. I can just tell AI to go and take care of that for me. An example is like a data transfer object or value object. Those are, most of the time gets these correct in my experience. The things that are like, there's not really like a opinion on it. It's this is how you do it. This is what it looks like. This could be really good at that. I find AI is really good at refactoring too. So if I need to make a change to some code that's a little brittle, it's usually pretty smart at making those changes. I'll just prompt it, say, hey, I'm worried it's, there's a high risk here because it's brittle code. I need to rework it to do this. And it's really good at doing it or fixing those and reworking that code. Maybe you're putting in an optimization in, or you need to make some sort of, tweak to that. It's really good at that. Things that's not great at is understanding the business domain and the rules. So that's where us as developers and our interactions with our product teams and the customers. This is where we need to be a liaison there and get the information we need and put it into a context that the agents can understand and use. So they can have the domain understanding and the business rules, and understanding the what needs to happen, why. It's also not great at architecture trade-offs. So sometimes it's going to go and break solid rules. Solid is an acronym for some good coding practices. Sometimes I'll see it doing things that are not best practices. So that's another area that you can have to watch for. I think it gets caught up in the keeping things KISS, keep it simple, stupid, versus architecting things well. AI does really well with patterns. So if you have some good classes, a good area of the code, you can say, hey, use this as a reference. This is well-written code. This is clean code. This is what we expect as a team or as a developer. And so if you can feed it that, it's a really good way to write the code. If I need to write or implement a new feature, and I know that there's a good example, I'll say, hey, go use, animal.php over here, or bird class, or cat and dog. They can go and read those and get that, and then follow that similar pattern. So it's really good if you can point it off to a good example, and they can keep that similar architecture for consistency. Overall, I'm finding my productivity as a developer has definitely gone up as I've adopted and been using AI. I spend a lot less time, like I mentioned, writing boilerplate code that's like monotonous or tedious. I'm spending a lot less time writing up and figuring out how things are going to interact. And I'm spending a lot more time figuring out code architecture and designing the system and making sure that code is going the right direction, that the code is well. I'm reviewing a lot more code. And I'm able to give feedback, and it's quickly making those feedbacks. That feedback loop is very fast. And so I feel like, to me, the code architecture is improving, and I'm able to interact to be a bigger part of that and produce more code. Refactoring with AI, it's really helpful for extracting services. If I need to go rename something, that's super fast and helpful with that. It's very, it most of the time gets that correct. Or if I need to separate, I'm just like, hey, this class is too big, or this function is too complex, I need to break this out. It's really good at separating that chunk of code out, and it's putting up that responsibility to decouple things. Being able to find where all the things are called from that and reworking that for me. Beyond just prompting, AI is really good at explaining what's going on in existing code. So if I stumble on a function that I'm not familiar with, or a class, I can go ask it, hey, what is this class doing and why? And it's really good at making a summary for me. It can help, if I say, hey, here's this class, here's a problem, can you explain it to me? Or if I need to, explain problems to me, it's really good at finding those problems and explaining how things interact. So use the chats to understand code too, not just the agents to write code. Debugging with AI. Just remember that stack traces are expensive, and make sure that it's removing its debugging line. Sometimes it adds debugging lines, which is hopefully it's clean. Usually it cleans it up itself, but sometimes it's got to make sure. It's really helpful with exception analysis, and you can do root cause after I find after I implement a bug, I can ask it, what caused this bug, and it can tell me what caused it, and giving some suggestions there, like how I can prevent bugs in the future. So it's really helpful for figuring out debugging bugs and tracking those down. It's important as a overall rule of thumb or practice that we're running the tests, that we're verifying things are correct, we're running static analysis, that we're looking at the changes being made, because ultimately we have ownership and responsibility over those changes being made. So trust but verify is kind of the way we need to approach the AI changes being made. Software engineers become more valuable. We're guiding the system, making sure that the architecture is correct and accurate and secure. And we're able to think more long-term and plan things out, and be more strategic about where our code bases are going. Spending more time reviewing code rather than writing the code. So we have the better ability to direct a software project. And as a team works together and people start using these strategies together, overall team velocity picks up and more things can get completed. So really I see this as AI is a big shift in skills. We are memorizing less syntax and more tedious things, and spending more time on the high value time, which is architecture and planning. I also see prompting as a key skill. It sounds simple on the surface, but experience and trying things out makes a difference on how the prompting, how the code results from the prompting. So making sure we're giving AI a good prompt that's short, concise, includes any technical details we need, and guiding it the right way is very helpful. And understanding the code really helps us be able to prompt a little bit better, but smarter. And making sure that we have really good context. Kind of be thrown, if you're thrown into a situation, you don't know what's going on, you're confused for a while, and AI behaves the same way. It has to go figure out what's going on before it can make the changes. But if we have really good context and documentation, that really helps guide and direct the AI agents. And then we're making fewer corrections as it goes along. We're spending less time and tokens on that and money. Patterns I recommend avoiding is blind accepting of the changes it's making. Always, always, always review the code that was being made. Again, avoid giant prompts and make sure your code is validated. If you're not using a static code analysis, if you're not using tests, start using those. The AI makes it so much easier to do that nowadays, and so it's not a lot of good excuses why not to. Treat AI like a collaborative teammate, not a combative teammate. It's nice that on a pull request, I've had a lot of feedback. Sometimes I feel a little bad, but I don't feel like that with AI. I feel like I can collaborate with it. I can say, give it a lot of details, and give it a lot of information. So AI works best with good guidance and good feedback. It's iterative. Keep giving it information. Keep giving it feedback for what is going on, and validating. Saying, hey, this isn't correct, or that is correct, so it understands what's right, what's wrong. DAI is really about reducing the friction. We're making the progress faster, and we're increasing our velocity as a developer, and be able to get things done faster. So it's really the best benefit is that we are getting more things done in less time. Key takeaways. AI is a collaborator. It's not a replacement, but it's kind of like a teammate. The context is important and really matters. Making sure we have good, rich, shared context. That we're taking ownership over the changes being made, not just blindly accepting it or validating what's going on. So again, the context matters, I would argue, more than the prompts. Having good context is going to help let AI know what's going on. If you find that you're constantly prompting the same thing, put it in your context, and you don't have to prompt about it again. Make sure the agents have the right guardrails. You're watching it and you're validating things. We won't get into the talking points. These are kind of more like questions, but I'll read over them just for you to think about. You can talk about them with your teams, or start lively conversations or debates or conversations about it. But now, are we optimizing for speed at the cost of understanding? That's a valid question. We're spending less time truly understanding the code base, or we're reading it instead. Should AI generated code require different review standards? So it's something you can talk about as amongst other developers, and it's a consideration like what review standards should you have for AI generated code. You can ask yourself, does AI reward good architecture more than ever? A little bit of a leading question, but kind of like why or what does that look like? Another question is, will static analysis become more important in the AI era? Like there's PHP stand, Solm, Rector, using strong and strictly types. The AI can generate the code quickly, but foundation matters more. So, what's the importance there? Another question that's come up in the news and other places too is, should companies be concerned about AI context leakage? And considering like what's the impact there? If you can use different plans and costs for things, but you can have your code public or private. And if assuming you want a private, what's the possibility of that being leaked, and also the context of your code base being leaked? Another big question is, how do the environmental costs compare with the technological advances made? There's been a lot of debate out in the region I live in about a major data center for AI. And so that's been a political item too, along with coming into water rights and questions about the environment. So there's those kind of questions that come up too. Really, this is like, I see AI as one of the biggest shifts in development in my career. The future is really about you developers using AI effectively. I really encourage you to, if you're not using it yet, to start looking at it. There's always the talk about, this developer is going to get left behind. You're going to miss out on that. And this is one of the technologies that actually does fit that bill, that does match that concern, where AI is becoming, is going to be critical and essential in a development. We won't go into questions, but I will go start looking at the chat. That's my talk here. Let's see. Okay, go pop over to the chat. Let's see, read the questions there. I don't have an AI-powered bike. Oh, sorry, Bobby, I don't. Eric Poe mentioned JetBrains has good MCP that works nicely with the IDE. Let's go out for free tier trial. There are some free trials. Ian had one. The name of it escapes me, but there are some free trials, and you can also use some local LLMs that you are paying for the processing costs locally, but that is an option.
Yeah, in terms of finding a free compute for these things, usually, as I mentioned in chat, you've got OpenRouter, OpenCode, and KiloCode. All of those will tend to have some free models that are available for a non-trivial amount of usage. They're not going to be as good as your top-end Anthropic or OpenAI models, but the quality of them is getting better enough that, for example, right now, you can get like Minimax M3 for free in some places, and that can actually do useful work. It'll actually kind of give you a feel for things, and you don't have to have a beefy machine to run it locally. Those will tend to cycle out because free compute gets people overloading things, but it's possible to find them and actually get useful work done. the one that I was mentioning at PHP Tech, literally a week later, they switched up their pricing model. So like it's a bit shifting sand on where you would want to go for something that's subsidized, but the principles wind up being pretty similar. It's just you have to be a lot more specific on a model that's not as intelligent.
Yeah, those are good points. Thank you. Let's read the other comments. And I just have a good offer for individual devs. Okay, from Bobby, and then the Gemini Code Assist. Okay. Thanks everybody for your time. That's my Mark Niebergall. Feel free to reach out to me on Mastodon. Pretty easy to find. I'm the only Mark Niebergall on the PHP Social Mastodon. It's pretty easy to find.
All right. Well, again, if you are around for second Thursday of next month at the same time, Joe Ferguson will be talking about Ansible. Again, Mark, thank you for presenting this evening.
You're welcome. Thank you.